to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God, boy.
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Sean.
Hello.
And Derek.
Hola.
And in this episode, we're reviewing Pumpkinhead, the cult classic starring Lance Henriksen, that was directed by Stan Winston, who is a special effects master, or who was, and was involved in a ton of movies that we love. So this movie was his directorial debut, and he didn't direct a ton of stuff after that, but we'll be discussing Pumpkinhead, and before that, we'll go through some recent news and things we've been watching. And to kick off the news, so one story that we discussed on the last podcast and that I saw every single horror site have at least 2 or 3 articles about was John Carpenter calling out Rob Zombie for comments he made in a documentary about Halloween, where he claimed that John Carpenter was cold to him and wasn't supportive of him making a remake, to which John Carpenter said that he was. And then he said, "Why did that piece of shit lie?" So every single site made a ton of posts about it, and it was from a Q&A session he did in New York, and I think in April. And I actually watched the video because, like, anytime somebody posts it, it gets taken down, so I managed to watch it before it got turned private or taken down. And it's really just like a 30-second section of, like, a longer video of Q&A stuff. And it was, like I said, that was everywhere. And then the thing that people haven't reported on as much is the follow-up to it, where John Carpenter tweeted, "To everyone fascinated with the JC/RZ, so the John Carpenter Rob Zombie feud, old news. We spoke Sunday, we buried the hatchet, let's move on." So a lot of people didn't report on that side of it as much as they did the initial incident, which is how everything works. So
Drama's more interesting.
yeah, so that puts that to rest, I guess. It doesn't change his criticisms of the film that he made, but I thought we'd at least bring that back and not just glance over it, because although most sites have posted that or updated their articles to include that, they still have like the headlines like, "John Carpenter calls Rob Zombie piece of shit."
Yeah.
Shit's
So-
on his movie.
Is the Q&A still up and available?
I don't think so, because I'd seen it from like the New York Film Society or whoever it was he did the interview for, and then it went private once this all blew up. And then other people had ripped it and uploaded it, and it's been getting taken down. So
Yeah, everywhere I've seen it, I've never actually saw the video. Everyone's been taken down that I've tried to watch.
I mean, too, like I said, if you read the quote, it's literally everything that he said, and it's like 30 seconds. So he doesn't drone on and on about it. He just makes that kind of one comment and then moves on to the next thing. So everybody, I think, once again, kind of blows these things out into larger proportions. Because it's like anytime like these big franchises or big directors or anything like that, they drive clicks or views or whatever. So everybody talks about it and makes all these big bombastic articles. Which is why any time that Robert Englund's at a con and he makes an off-the-cuff comment about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, every single site posts an article about it. And it's like, sometimes these dudes just make an off-the-cuff comment. It's not really that big of news.
Yeah.
And it may not...
Unfortunately, there's just not enough interesting stuff going in the horror world to, you know what I mean, to be bigger news than these like baby feuds or offhanded comments that they, you know, a lot of people hang on to, not just media sites, but the fans too.
Well, I think anytime an article involving Rob Zombie and piece of shit gets used on a horror site, it's going to drive a ton of people to have a reaction to it.
Yeah.
Good or bad. Because I was just looking through YouTube recently, and our episode where we reviewed 31 has like a few thumbs up and then 2 dislikes. Usually we don't get a lot of, we get like a handful of likes, and usually that's about it. The only times we get thumbs down are when it's movies by Eli Roth or Rob Zombie, usually, because people thumbs down our disapproval of movies like Cabin Fever, the Cabin Fever remake, which all of us were very negative on. A few people gave us thumbs down. And I don't know if that's like, people don't leave comments too. So it's like, was it because it's a full-length podcast that's on YouTube that we just post there? Or is it just because they don't like our opinion?
Yeah.
It's probably more of the second, because I don't think you would listen to the entire thing or get beyond the first 3 seconds and then give a thumbs down, but who knows. But that's why everybody talks about those guys so much, Rob Zombie or even Eli Roth, is because people talking about them drives a ton of conversation, despite the fact they haven't been responsible for all that many films in the past 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, who knows? But I figure we at least make sure we came back and didn't just skip over the resolution to that feud. Some other news that's related to television, and there's a number of TV series that are in the works, so let's kind of briefly, kind of lump them all together. So the movie What We Do in the Shadows that we really liked from last year, that was kind of like a vampire mockumentary that had Jermaine Clement in it from Flight of the Conchords, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of his name, Taika Waititi was in that film. He's also the director of it, and he's also directing the upcoming Thor film, Thor Ragnarok. They're doing a spin-off to that movie, which is called Werewolves, which is about the werewolf characters, which is a clever kind of pun thing. But they're also making a TV spin-off called Paranormal Event Response Unit, which is the cops from that show. And I think that's something that actually would make a good TV series, especially if it's like 30-minute episodes.
Yeah. So when we review this too, I think I may have brought that up even, that like this is big enough to be a TV series. Like, and I want to see the guys, a series about them in the house, but obviously they probably are so busy they can't be in every episode or whatever. But this is an awesome direction for it, because it is kind of, they do build a world in that already in that small film. So this show does not replace the spinoff movie.
No, it's
that's
separate.
great.
So yeah, the spinoff is still in production and supposedly happening, and this will be a separate thing because it kind of covers different characters and things like that. So yeah, I really hope this gets made, and the werewolves, because I just love that universe so much, and it was fun. Derek, you still haven't watched that yet, have you?
No, I need to.
Yeah, we'll have to get you a copy of it. It's on HBO. It's just a hilarious movie that if you enjoy like the different types of vampires, because they have like the kind of Nosferatu type vampire, and then like Victorian or Elizabethan era vampire, then kind of like Vlad the Impaler type guy. So they kind of have all these different things mixed in.
That's a good movie to watch this October for Halloween, I think.
Yeah, like if you have, like I always talk about, like, showing stuff to people that aren't horror fanatics or whatever. That's a good movie if you have a group of people together to show them, because it's hilarious. And it still has some gore and stuff too for the hardcore horror fans. So I think that's an all-around enjoyable movie. So that's a show I'm looking forward to. And there's a couple of other shows that are also being made that make sense to varying degrees and levels. So there is going to be supposedly there's a Purge TV series that's in talks, and the director of the Purge series, DeMonico, James DeMonico was talking about it with Cinema Blend, and he had said that it wouldn't be an anthology, that it would be more of an interwoven anthology. So I think kind of like over the course of a Purge night, like 7 different stories that would run throughout the season, interconnecting and things like that, showing different points of view and what led people to want to participate in the Purge. And he said that, it seems like it's pretty far along. They're discussing the money aspect of it, so it seems like a thing that will probably happen. So that's something that we could be seeing.
I wonder where that'll end up at.
I definitely think that's not a basic network show. I think that has to be cable. It didn't really give any information as to who was in the talks to pick it up. But something like FX, I think, would fit well, or, the premium channels, since the movies are all R, you'd think maybe something like Showtime or Cinemax or HBO.
What about Skinemax?
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of, I won't say this is harsh, but if you're going to rate the Purge movies, like where they come in as far as, in my perception of cable networks, not that think this network would do that, but they feel like a TNT.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking
good,
that too.
Like pretty good, but nothing like must see, but pretty solid and kind of a different flavor than what's on the other channels. Because I wouldn't see AMC, this being an AMC thing, really.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they're in their wheelhouse, really.
Yeah.
Even though they do like The Walking Dead, It just doesn't seem like something that they would do.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a Stars thing, you know.
Let's see. So the production companies on it were Platinum Dunes and Blumhouse, and it was distributed by Universal. So if it's distributed by Universal, then that means it'll probably end up on Sci-Fi or USA if they have any types of.
I could see it being. I could see it being on USA
because Mr. Robot and things like that have kind of changed the perception.
That would make sense. But then again, if they don't want the TV, they could just sell off the TV rights, you know.
Yeah, because I know sometimes too, like the way all those TV deals work. Sometimes it's kind of complicated, but it depends on who's producing it and who owns the rights and all that, where it'll end up. Because a lot of times, if a network is producing a show, they also want to air the show because they own the profits from going into syndication versus just airing a show that someone else produced. You get money based on advertising or whatever, but you don't own all the money that comes from the show getting to syndication. It's a lot of boring stuff.
So I got a better idea than any of that is you all had. How about we sell it to like NBC and they just do a office ripoff of the Purge,
like a workplace mockumentary.
Yes, but instead, like, he's in the city streets and they're just talking to people as they're purging.
Yeah, the guy's like, yeah, man. I'm trying to remember a joke from The Office. Just somebody's like making like a quippy joke. Like, yeah, sometimes like when you get your axe stuck in their head, it's really hard to get it back out. And then just kind of like they look to camera and do like a goofy look like Jim from The Office did.
Yes.
And then
so like it would be highly entertaining for like one episode. Then
I could make it through about 30 seconds of that and enjoy it and then be done.
Yeah, not to say that The Office wasn't good, but like
kind of like how I feel about this season of American Horror Story.
But it's like you can get through about one episode of it and you're like, okay, that was enjoyable and that's it.
All right, so another TV property that's being worked on by NBC Universal is an anthology called Welcome to Hitchcock, which would kind of follow in Hitchcock's type of storytelling and filmmaking, and be an anthology that would focus on a single season-long mystery or crime. And they're working with the Hitchcock estate for this. And I don't know how grave an idea this is to attach the name of somebody that's passed away years ago.
Are they remaking stories that he's done or episodes that have been produced from his old show?
So I'm just looking at the article from Bloody Disgusting. And they just said, in the spirit of the classic Hitchcock style and legacy, the anthology will focus on a single season-long mystery or crime.
Okay.
Plans are in place for all potential future seasons to be produced in step with the Hitchcock estate.
Yeah, I read that like quickly yesterday, and I got kind of confused because I thought it said like a season-long thing, but then when it said in the spirit of, I must have assumed it was, being basically one of those stories kind of reimagined.
Yeah, I mean, because they've already had the show that Bates Motel that kind of covers Psycho is like a prequel, and then supposedly this last season of it will be the stuff that happened in the movie Psycho. So they have kind of done that already, and I don't think you can make in today's climate an entire season about the birds.
Yeah,
and
I was thinking it was going to be remaking episodes of the Hitchcock Presents.
For Hitchcock Presents,
yeah, that's what I was like when I glanced over it.
So it sounds like they're just going to make a Hitchcockian type show, which, I mean, that's kind of just calling like a show like Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. It's like, is he making episodes and directing? No, it's in his style. It's like, well, so we'll see what comes out of it. Since his family and the estate's involved, it's likely they won't let something happen if it's completely terrible, unless they're hurting for money. But it is kind of odd to have it be called Welcome to Hitchcock, considering.
Well, I guess if it's almost, it's kind of like when they brought back Twilight Zone, the show. I feel like it's almost like that. Like, granted, this is a season-long anthology thing, but for people that did watch like Hitchcock Presents, if you evoke that same feeling, like, oh, this is like a Hitchcock Presents type thing, I'm definitely on board for that. So I can see that. I can see the appeal, and the fact that saying that alone makes it feel like a very different thing than something like Walking Dead or Ash vs. Evil Dead, like any of the other horror properties out there. It very much is an easy way to put a name on something to identify what type of show it is. Granted, we don't know for sure, but you could like take some guesses based on having Hitchcock's name involved at all.
And it's since it's a NBC Universal cable productions that's developing it, so it'll probably end up on one of their cable networks. And I guess the network that it ends up on tells you their priority or how good they think it'll be, because if they put it on a lesser network, then it tells you that they probably don't have much belief in it. But if it ends up on USA or something, then they probably have a little bit more confidence. So we'll see what comes out of it. I mean, out of all these TV projects we've talked about, the one to me that I want to see the most is the What We Do in the Shadows spinoff, just because I enjoyed that movie so much and I thought it was fun. The Purge I could see working as a TV series, but I mean, I think that it could also be really bad and boring.
Well, too, we've gotten 3 of those films already, so it's like, and granted, they can do a lot of interesting things, but it's not like we're clamoring for more. And I think
I think that's a universe that the more you break it down and look into it, the more it makes less sense.
Yeah, and even that third one, it was kind of light. It's almost like a satire or something. It's very much not based on gritty realism because it is kind of such a goofy concept. But it was more about like a lot of like symbolism and stuff like that.
But I think if you try to break it down, it's like, okay, so everyone goes out and does a bunch of crime and killing in one night, and then for the rest of the year they behave themselves. Like, that's not really the way things will work. I think it would just get people riled up to want to do it even more. But yeah,
there'd be like a purge night every month.
Yeah, because in America we got to do everything extra large and bigger and better.
Yeah, purge will start in July like Christmas does.
Well,
and then real quick before we switch off TV, The Strain is coming to an end in the 4th season as well,
which is a show I've yet to watch.
Yeah,
despite the fact that it's produced by Guillermo del Toro. It's just all the stuff I heard didn't sound promising. And it looks like the vampires are the same design they used for Nomak and the vampires from Blade 2, because they have like the mouths that kind of open up and stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing really grabbed me. There's never anybody in the cast that was anybody I was really all that excited to see. So I'll probably go back and watch it at some point. Just nobody that I know who watches a lot of TV where we have the same taste has watched it or enjoyed it.
Yeah. But, I've heard some people say they do some pretty wild stuff on there and go in some interesting directions. So the fact that it is ending in 4 seasons, that makes me more likely to watch it as well. Because I think, like, okay, I can do this, get it done, and just see this whole story.
Yep. So out of all the news, I think that was kind of the main things that were relevant to the things we're talking about. Because there's some other stuff, like apparently there's a new Saw movie that's in production, but I didn't even finish that series out just because I kind of got bored with them at a certain point. And it's one of those things where every year they come out on the day before or of Halloween. It's like, I think you make a lot of money, but you kind of cut yourself off at the knees, because who wants to go and see, you're prepping for Thanksgiving and Black Friday and all that stuff. Who wants to go see Saw?
Yeah, like, who wants to see a movie where people just have terrible disfigurements before
And then also Insidious 4, I guess, wrapped, right?
Yeah, Insidious 4 wrapped. It's coming out next year. So a lot of horror franchises are extending into 2017. I mean, that was planned to come out 2017, and there'll be a Halloween and a Friday the 13th, and I think the Texas Chainsaw got pushed, and Ring got pushed.
On paper, those movies will come out. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of confidence based on how much some of the stuff's been getting pushed around, but we'll see. The only, I think Blumhouse producing Halloween, if they have somebody attached and are rolling cameras in the next 2.5, 3 months, I think they got a shot, but otherwise it might not.
You could see Blumhouse being the one that have the most, they got the biggest chance of getting something actually produced and out there.
But but no news on that since kind of all those big announcements initially, so we'll have to wait and see. But
it's October, so hopefully we get a lot more big news announcements soon as well.
Yep, so I think that was all the news. Now I can move into the things we've been watching. And then one of the things we're all going to talk about is Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 2, the premiere. But before we do that, just kind of briefly go through everything else. So I'll just kind of start off. Scream Queen Season 2. Didn't like the second episode any more than the first one. I think the problem with it, and I think that something that just kind of clicked for me, was I think they dramatically reduced the budget because it feels much smaller because they're shooting primarily like in a hospital location. So it just kind of feels more confined and like it's closed off and there's not as much going on. And the ratings for it have been pretty bad and dropping from episode to episode and off from last year, which wasn't great to begin with. So this show may be coming to an end after the season. Just nothing I saw in this made me excited or, even laugh the way the first season did. Having two dudes in the shower that keep opening the shower curtains and looking at each other's dicks, like that's not funny. It sounds funny here, but it's not funny to watch.
It just sounds funny in a ridiculous sort of way being on Fox TV.
Yeah.
As one of their, I don't want to say flagship shows, but, from a horror TV show.
Yeah, or like the show that they are very heavily pushing towards millennials with the storyline and stuff. It's just, I don't know. Like, I probably won't finish watching this season. Just nothing here has grabbed me. It just feels like a cheaper version of the first one. Because the first one, they're at a college campus. It takes places in multiple buildings, and there's people outdoors. This feels like it's mostly taking place inside this hospital, and I despise hospital shows.
So what you're saying is, one of your gripes with it is one of the biggest issues I have with Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yeah, so we'll get to Ash vs. Evil Dead in a minute. Difference is we don't have to do the motorboat here.
That's the only way I can respond
But
to
the
it.
difference is that Ash vs. Evil Dead, you may disagree, was kind of built around like, okay, you have this character of Ash and these characters interacting, and it's a 30-minute episode, and they're doing, they're accomplishing specific
Stand in
things.
this 1 5x5 area.
For a few
and
of the
by 5 by
episodes.
5, I mean 5 inches by 5 inches, not 5 foot by 5
But
foot.
watching that show, similar to here, I think the budget dictated the locations and all that stuff. So with
Dark,
this, the difference...
dimly lit, dirty looking area, stand in one spot, fake blood splatter, end show credits.
The thing
Yeah,
I was,
but a lot of the dialogue and jokes were well done.
Like a difference I would say here in Scream Queens is they have a lot of jokes that to me are reaching, and they've just had these characters double down even more on their behavior from prior seasons, and it's just the shtick has worn off. Like it's funny for a little bit, but the 50,000th time that Emma Roberts says something terrible, it's not really funny. After she's said like all these terrible things, and after they brought back the best character on the show, Chad Radwell, and he really wasn't even funny here either. So it's just, I don't know, I just feel like they lost a lot changing settings from a college to a hospital. But because I think they want to skewer hospital shows more than horror stuff, which I think is a mistake. But American Horror Story, watched the most recent episode of that, episode 3. I don't know what they're doing with this. Kathy Bates was in this one more heavily. Lady Gaga was in it some. They had, some things that were a little bit more interesting. Like, I don't know, like I've heard they keep promising some big twist, and a big twist could make it interesting, but it's just nothing they've done to this point has shown me that they have the ability to write stories that I really enjoy watching. So I may just not continue watching this, or if I do, just only mention anything noteworthy. Just there's no point to just bash on something, because I see a lot of times reviews for websites, they have a reviewer that doesn't like a show, and they're the one who does reviews for like Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead, and all people in comments are just, get this person off here. If they don't like it, they shouldn't be reviewing it. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, I think you can have somebody that just objectively reviews something and says, I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
Versus you don't have to get somebody that drinks the Kool-Aid and loves it, because that's disingenuous. So,
But yeah, it doesn't really serve much if it's not somebody's cup of tea, and then they're sitting there having to, give it negative review week after week, because no matter what, they're not going to like it.
Yep. So that's those shows, and then just very, very briefly, so Luke Cage, the Marvel show, which is on Netflix, that focuses on the character of Luke Cage, the titular character. That show debuted on Friday, which was September 30th, and I've watched a good chunk of the episodes. I'm like 7 episodes in, and I'm enjoying the show a lot. I really have enjoyed watching it, much more than Scream Queens or American Horror Story, just because it's a superhero story, but it's grounded and it's a real character. Even though they have abilities, they're in real situations that have to do with like real life type crime stuff, And there's a few Wire alum that show up in the show. So it's not The Wire by any stretch of the imagination, but it feels more something like on that side of the scale than it does Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or kind of superhero-y type shows. Like they're a little bit, there's cursing, there's sex. Not there's any graphic sex, but there is some.
Who is Luke Cage? Like, what's his hook? Who is he as a character?
Well, first off, the big thing is, obviously he's one of like the first black characters that's a superhero that's gotten their own movie and or TV series, and it's set in Harlem, and it kind of has a little bit cool vibe with like the music, and then they kind of during one type of scene they had Wu-Tang Clan playing and stuff. And then there's characters in there that talked about Jet Li and Bruce Lee and kung fu movies and stuff. So it kind of has a cool vibe. His powers are essentially that he's mostly invulnerable, and he's extra strong. So he's kind of like trying to think, what are the other superheroes that have that? I mean, he's not he can be hurt by some things, but he's
he's like halfway to Superman.
Yeah, like if he walks in a room and people have like an assault rifle and are just shooting all over the place, like it won't hurt him. And if somebody hits him in the head with like a brick or something that doesn't hurt him, he can just punch him and easily take him out. Like they have to use very special things to be able to hurt him at all. So he's kind of like a much less powerful, kind of like everyday Superman type character. He can't fly or anything like that, and he can't jump far. He's just able to take a lot of punishment and is stronger than normal. But
if you were a Superman character and could take damage, but like you could fly and jump far, I think you would die very quickly.
Yeah. He's he's not going to take on the Hulk or anything, but he would be able to fight off most of the heroes, or stand with most of them. Like if he had been thrown into a Civil War, the newest Captain America film, he could have had it. Fine. He could have had it. Yeah, he could have held his own and done fine in that conflict.
More powerful than Scarlett Johansson's character.
Yes.
Black Widow.
Yeah, because she can fight well, but he would just be impervious to weapons.
Yeah.
Well, like something me and William were talking about too is the one thing that's kind of cool about Luke Cage and Black Panther being introduced are that you finally actually get like standalone cool black characters.
Yeah, that aren't sidekicks.
Because a lot of times, like with African Americans and women, you always get like their sidekicks. They're never they're always needing help from someone else, or that Scarlett Johansson's character Black Widow, while she's strong, she'll probably never get her own movie, because it hasn't happened yet, and she's been in the franchise for what, 6 years now,
since Iron Man 2, which is like 2010 maybe
11.
Yes, or 10 or 11, so at least 5 or 6 years.
But you actually like with Black Panther, because a lot of times like you have Falcon, but he's kind of got like a nerdy looking suit, and he's very much the sidekick of Captain America. And you have like Don Cheadle's War Machine, great actor and pretty awesome person, but like again, kind of like a sidekick. Where you have like Black Panther is his own dude. He's nobody's sidekick, and he has one of the coolest looking suits. So it's kind of like a nice change of the guard almost, I guess.
Well, they did it, similar to how like Star Wars Episode 7 introduced a female lead that was, fighting and jumping all over the place just with the guys. These have been relatively seamless character introductions where it's not like making a deal of it. It's just they're the characters. Here they are. Here they go off and do their thing. It's not pandering or anything like that. It's just telling, superheroes have been around for quite a while, just actually giving them their due.
Yeah.
And I think that telling these different types of stories and having kind of the Harlem vibe and all that is, cool and sets it apart. And I wish that more of these studios would take not even really the risk, would just do what Marvel's doing with these Netflix series and show versions of these characters that aren't super colorful, aimed at kids with, but then there's controversy because the Iron Fist, which is the next Marvel series for a standalone character, is a white dude who's the whitest of white dudes. He was the actor, I believe is Finn Jones, or he was Sir Loras on Game of Thrones. And the character of Iron Fist is kind of like an Asian inspired character where, of course, like a white dude goes and masters like a culture and gets these powers. Everyone was calling for that to be an Asian character or actor.
Who was he in Game of Thrones?
He was Loras Tyrell. He was like Marjorie's brother. Like the blonde dude that dated originally.
Yes.
So that's
Got
where
it.
most people know him from. He's probably been in other stuff, but that's the main things. They get like a very white dude with like blonde hair and stuff. And everyone initially, a lot of people were calling for, since this character, gets all these powers and has all this Asian influence in it, why don't you let there be an Asian actor who portrays the character? But then they stuck with the origin and the way the character was in the comics, where he's a white guy. So, once again, doesn't affect me because I'm a white guy, but I can see how somebody who sees all these elements of culture taken, like that Matt Damon movie that's coming out where he's in China and fighting, like when you see they take these stories that are about like 99% Asian culture and then they have a white person as the lead. It's like, you can do that in a tasteful way, or if the story calls for it, like The Last Samurai.
Yeah, I was just say like The Last Samurai, or like,
I've heard
the
criticism
Wolverine.
against that though.
Yeah, like white dude comes in, becomes the best samurai, and is obviously the last one.
And
to
the
live.
last one,
So, but it's one of those things where there's always things we say on both sides of it. There's the comic purists who don't want it to change and all that. But at least, with Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Daredevil, I thought those have all been pretty good. So I'm looking forward to finishing that in the series they have coming up. So,
Well, I guess they didn't get a white guy and to try to. At least they didn't get a white guy and try to make him look Asian.
yeah,
like you could have done something really bad.
Avatar:
like
The
that.
Last Airbender,
Yeah.
the movie directed by
there was
M. Night
rumors
Shyamalan.
that they were doing that with Scarlett Johansson and Ghost in the Shell.
Well, I was
Yeah.
about to bring up Ghost in the Shell because there's a lot of backlash about her being the lead in it.
But so far, Luke Cage is the bomb. So check it out if you've watched any of that stuff. So that was pretty much all the stuff I watched. So anybody else watch anything that wasn't Ash versus Evil Dead?
No.
I watched real quick. I did watch Steve Jobs, and that was very excellent. I feel like I watched something else too, but I cannot remember earlier in the week. Right now, I'm in Brevard, North Carolina, visiting my wife's aunt and uncle, and I was talking to her aunt about, I don't know why we started talking about Sharknado, and the composer for part 2 through 4, Shane Prather, he's scoring the segment I did for Volumes of Blood horror stories. But anyway, she and her husband Sid are like huge fans of Sharknado, so they have all of them on DVR. So anyway, she's like, "You haven't seen any of them?" I was like, "No." So we watched Sharknado 1. I think it was last night or the night before. Have you guys seen that?
I'd seen some of the first one, and it's like I don't really care much for schlock's sake, where they're obviously trying to, like, it's not those movies like that Roger Corman pumped out, or that people with a straight face tried to make in the 70s or 80s. It's very much a very conscious thing where everyone knows what they're doing. They cast Tara Reid and the dude from Beverly Hills 90210, and he's got a chainsaw and like all this shit.
Hey, and Mark Cuban. He was like in the third one.
And they have like Kelly Ripa and all these people show up in them. So it's a very conscious thing where they know what they're doing. And that doesn't really appeal to me. So I haven't, like, I've seen bits and pieces of the first one, but I've never watched any of them in their entirety just because I'm like, this is so far the parts I've watched, like, oh, that's what I thought it would be. And then I just move on. So
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of the same, like, I kind of felt like I knew what those films were, and they are largely that for sure. But I still, like, we're essentially on vacation here, so it's like one of those films to turn on. It actually kept me engaged the entire time because so much stuff happens. Like, they do a pretty good job of making crazy stuff happen, even if it's for no sense, like nearly every single scene. So I definitely appreciate on that level because there's just like random stuff. Like they're driving their car, all of a sudden it stops driving. They look down, it's leaking gas, and they all run away, and it blows up for no reason at all. Like, that was just a reason for them to have to walk somewhere. But then they just get a car like a few moments later anyway. Like, there's just like all this nonsensical stuff that happens. But at the same time, it's for some reason engaging. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not looking away, or you're not really getting too bored. So even though it's like schlock for schlock's sakes, it's done well, for what it is. I'm interested in seeing those other ones, especially because Shane, I've been talking to him quite a bit since he scored those. I just want to check it out. I know he said the production time on those, he believes, are like 2 weeks, the shooting time.
yeah,
So-
they're very much a lot of green screen,
Yeah.
digital stuff, quick turnaround.
Yeah. So it's just fascinating to see on that level too of what they're able to accomplish even in 2 weeks. Like for as schlocky as you think it is, I don't know how long they took in that first one. I'm guessing it probably was still about the same. But that's pretty impressive, that they've got that much done in that amount of time, if that was the schedule for that first film.
A lot of that sci-fi stuff, because there's been different people who've made movies for sci-fi, and it's like, these are terrible. How do they get them? How do they convince them to let them make these movies? And it's because they do it on like a 2-week timetable. They turn them in on budget, like $1 million, which is cheaper than an individual episode of most TV series. And they do well enough in the ratings because it's schlocky stuff that everybody knows what it is. So that's how sci-fi churns a lot of their stuff out.
Yeah, it's interesting that sci-fi has like dug that niche in themselves. Like, you think just by chance, because I think originally they were just making movies that were just not great, and they didn't really know what they were. You know what I mean? They didn't really know what they were doing.
It was like everything at the wall and
yeah, they're like,
stuck.
This is the best we can do with the money we can give, and then like it found an audience. Like my wife's mom like loves watching Sci-Fi Channel, and I watched a lot of that when I was probably like mid 2000s when I stayed over there a lot. When she lived at home. So it's just interesting that like that stuff slowly found an audience, and now it's like kind of evolved into being more self-aware. Granted, yeah, it's not like my favorite genre or anything, but there's definitely something interesting about it. And it was a fun movie to watch with her and, my wife and stuff, and just hanging out like, okay, we're going to watch this dumb thing and not take it too seriously. And, yeah, I enjoyed watching it actually. And I'm kind of, now I want to watch the other ones. But other than that, I think that was pretty much it from what I remember. It's been kind of a blur since we've been here. We traveled here late last week. So everything before that is just, we got wiped from my mind because it seemed like it was a different time. It seemed like that was like a month ago when I was at home. So yeah, I think that was pretty much it, except for Ash vs. Evil Dead and Pumpkinhead from a few weeks ago.
All right, so now we're going to just go through and discuss the premiere of Season 2 of Ash vs. Evil Dead. And we actually got to watch this early because IGN had streamed it from their Facebook page. And then once it got done streaming, you could watch it over in its entirety. And now, if you haven't noticed, Facebook, you can Chromecast videos from Facebook to a Chromecast if you have one, which is quite useful because that's how I watch a lot of stuff. So I was able to watch it on TV in full HD. And it was the second season premiere. The episode was titled Home. And it wasn't like a supersized episode, or it wasn't directed by Sam Raimi or anything. Because I guess it looks like they're not going to have him direct any more episodes, or none that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I feel like they would have announced it. It'd been nice if you could do the season finale of this or something, but
yeah. But the the series is from the first season was basically just, it was a follow up however many years after, kind of ambiguous because they didn't really mention any of the events from Army of Darkness, although they have hinted at the fact that those may come into play some this season. But if nothing else, it picked up after the end of Evil Dead 2, which would have been in the mid 80s, depending on the timeline they're using. So picking up 30 years after the original movies, and season 1 kind of went through all that.
Real quick too, if it's not on Facebook, you can also watch that premiere episode on Stars for free right now as well, even without having a subscription. Yeah,
if you go to stars.com, because they also showed it that way because they want to get people pumped up for this. And so, the first season, if you haven't seen it, go out and watch it. You can buy it now on Blu-ray or DVD or iTunes or somewhere you can find it. And then season 2, so the episode is essentially Ash and the gang having to go back to his hometown, which is why it's called Home. And this season, to me at least so far, looks like they got a little bit of a budget boost because it seemed like there were more effects in this individual episode than there were in most of last season. And they went to multiple locations.
It was a premiere episode though, so
yeah. So it could be a bait and switch, and they'll just spend the rest of it in like a warehouse and then like a cabin or something. But as the premiere went, I think that they had a lot of action in it, and it kind of doubled down on the representation of Ash that they're giving. Kind because like the iterations of Ash have all been kind of different from like the first film to the second one to Army of Darkness have all been quite different representations of Ash, and this is just kind of further doubled down on what they did last season. And I thought that this premiere episode, I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought that it was better than most of last season.
Yeah, me too. It didn't. It's not going to top that season or the series premiere directed by Sam Raimi, but it for sure was, in my mind, easily better than a lot of the episodes from last season. What did you think, Derek? Since you weren't really a fan of that,
he was the most
season.
critical of season one by far.
Still, my thing is like it still didn't sell me on like wanting to watch this series again, because I just feel like it's going to be the old bait and switch. Like you said, it's a premiere episode. That probably a lot of the budget went into this one, and then what I have to watch like the second and third episode, I guess, or maybe if actually that requires me to get the stars, I won't, but or whatever it's on. I just there wasn't enough here to make me be like, oh yeah, I'm really I still have my same feelings where like it just the first episode of the first season was amazing, and then you had a bunch of just lackluster stuff in between, which everything Bruce Campbell did as far as what he does I love, but I just something in the show has never gelled with me, just to me it never felt like Evil Dead, and this one just I guess too that my biggest problem with this is that like I don't mind the goofy Ash that they went with in. I guess if I had to pick one that I like the best, I like the Evil Dead 2 Ash the most, because that's the one where he's like the most knowledgeable version of himself. And then when they get into Army of Darkness, he's a little goofier, but not trashy. But then like this iteration of him is like the trashy Ash.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've just never been able to buy into that much.
Yeah, so like in Evil Dead 1 and 2, he's like a college student who's, just going on vacation with his girlfriend or friends. And then in this iteration, so on the show Ash vs. Evil Dead, he's living in a trailer. He's, smoking pot with some local trailer park girl or something.
What kind of reminds me of a little bit is the Kingpin version of Ash. Like that's what, because he's like
the Woody Harrelson.
Yeah, because he's like sleeping
Fairly
with
Brothers
the
movie.
nasty trailer park landlord lady, and in the Kingpin movie he does the same thing with the land. It just, when I watch this movie, I always feel like, or not movie, when I watch this TV series, I feel like I'm watching that movie but set with demonic
but to
stuff.
be fair though, like at the bars and stuff he went to in the first season, he was hooking up with chicks who were not bad looking.
He went to a bar,
but
and
he was
hooked up with a chick.
But he was, and like, the girl that he hooked up with that was one of the first Deadites that came back. Like she looked okay. I mean, not to dwell on the appearance of the lady, I'm saying they did that thing where he's like a sleazy character that gets to hook up with girls that are half of Bruce Campbell's age, just because that's the way they're writing the show. And once again, nothing really wrong or bad with that. It's just they play him up to be competent at times and then incredibly stupid.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think I have the biggest problem with.
But that's like a self-deprecating thing from Sam Raimi with Bruce Campbell that I think that they would have done in a new movie as well.
Yeah, but I think that, which is fine to do it, but I think that the way they did it to me just kind of stepped away from the original feeling of the movie. And that's the biggest problem I have with it, because it's, I know it's a TV series, you maybe can't compare it to the movie, but you can because it's directly from it, and to me it doesn't feel.
Yeah, I mean he didn't have a lot of really layers in that in Evil Dead 2, and I think they just had to flesh him out to make him be a more interesting character, and I think the easiest way to make him more interesting is to kind of, again, make him just more of a kind of an asshole at times. You know what I mean? Because it allows him for more quips. It allows him for just more humor between people when he kind of like belittles them and everything. So I think it was an easy route, and it was kind of a logical progression, because it does feel like it's very much like a step further from Army of Darkness.
I mean, too, like to me, that first episode with Sam Raimi directing felt Evil Dead to me. It felt like what you would kind of expect out of a follow-up to that series in a movie format. And none of the directors after that were able to really kind of bring that kind of cinematic feel to it, because they had a lot of people who were TV people, and the showrunners were more involved with it than Sam Raimi. So it's just, once you have the person that created this series and directed the original 3 films and worked with the star for forever, once you step away from that, you're going to lose a little bit of the feeling, just because the differences in creative talent, and even everybody could be doing a great job, they're just not going to feel the same. And I think they've kind of went further and further away from what The Evil Dead felt like, while keeping the characters in the universe and kind of fleshing things out to work as a TV show.
Yeah, it very much is like a whole totally different thing than the movies at this point, as far as the feel of it. And I can kind of get what you're saying, Derek, where something just hasn't gelled with you because it's a different flavor. And I agree, it is a different flavor. It's just for me, it's worked, and it's not like this episode. The reason I'm going to keep watching is because I liked a lot of the action in this episode, a lot of the humor, even some of the slapstick stuff I really liked. The inclusion of his dad as Lee Majors, the Bionic Man, and they even make a joke about that when they see Ash, and they talk about him being better, faster, and stronger. A lot of the character stuff is the reason I'm like, yes, I'm in on this season. The plot stuff, not so much. And I think that's why it doesn't bother me that they're kind of, if they stick around someplace, because, the minor spoilers here, the whole hook about this episode is that he basically has to team up with Lucy Lawless's character, him and his what are the girls' name?
Pablo and Kelly. They have to go back to Michigan and team up with Lucy Lawless to fight the evil forces again. So there's not much there that makes you think like, oh no, the stakes are really high. Things have been flipped upside down. It's just more of, okay, well, we're setting these things up. So here are the characters you're going to be dealing with in this season. And I just want to see them interact at this point. Like, I just want to see great dialogue, some good jokes, some good action and slapstick humor. There's not a lot of drama in it though. And I could see that a lot of great TV, even if they're comedies like Silicon Valley or what did we just watch from Kenny? Vice Principals.
Danny McBride. Yeah, Vice Principals. Those are that's like a tragedy comedy. Like TV has really raised the bar, and this doesn't feel like it's raised it in the same way. As far as action and humor, it's up there, but it's not layered like a lot of TV is now. It's not delivering on multiple things. It's basically just doing this one thing pretty damn well week to week.
Well, and the other thing I would say is when you compare this to something like, say, American Horror Story, on that show, a lot of times the first episode or two will start out promising, but then once they start to unravel all of the details behind what is the hauntings or the scary elements, then it completely becomes not scary. And when you then have the entire rest of the season, and with the assumption being the audience will find it scary, I think you fall flat. I think it's better to do what this does and to keep that gore and action, just go further with action and not worry about how scary it is. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's hard to keep something scary for that long, it seems. Like, if you hinge on the humor, again, more than the horror, it's easier to keep that up for an extended amount of time. Because comedies seem to work the best on TV. Like, comedies from, the beginning of television are kind of the thing that are consistently seem to work as a genre.
And like I said, Bruce Campbell's done, great work, and I'm glad to see him be on, talk shows and actually getting out there in the public eye and having a little bit of a, star run, even though it's, not like his career is mostly the story of things he didn't get, but at least now he gets his own TV series where he's the main character and he gets to...
and he seems like he's having a great time, like especially this episode. Like, he seems like he's having just as good a time as he did on any of those films. It's just you can tell he's putting everything into it, and it's great to see that. It's great to see it. It seems like even his sidekicks and everybody in this, Lucy Lawless, seem to be like really enjoying themselves, and they're not like out of character at all. But it just seems like they're like going for it, and they're having like a really good time doing it. And it seems like everybody's excited about the show, and It does not seem like this is lazy in any element of it. The editing, the shooting, the cinematography, any of the actors, like it all seems like everybody is just putting 110% into this. It may not be their thing, but it definitely seems like it just seems like a passion project more than a TV show that you would see on Stars or somewhere else, And
it does look like they're using more practical blood and gore so far in this one episode.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But so I guess that kind of wraps up the discussion of Ash vs. Evil Dead. We'll revisit it as these, concurrent or following episodes air. And now we can move into our discussion of Pumpkinhead, which is not about a deformed child or something. Or if you just hear Pumpkinhead, you would think about some like country bumpkin that has like a pumpkin-shaped head. But this is not what the movie's about. And two, like just a second ago, not related to the podcast at all, in my computer chair, I was kind of turning from side to side a little bit, and then it started making a noise. It sounded like a woman saying hello. And I'm recording my office on the second floor, so I was like, is there somebody on my driveway trying to talk up to the window? And then I realized it was my chair and not a person.
It's Halloween. Things are getting spooky.
So that just had to take a second just to mention that. I was like, no, it's not a person. It's 20 foot tall trying to talk to me. But Pumpkinhead. So this movie came out in 1988, was directed by Stan Winston, who sadly passed away a few years ago, but he had done special effects work on Terminator 2. He had done work on something as recent as Iron Man and Aliens and The Thing. So worked on a ton of movies that, are classics and that we all love. And then he directed Pumpkinhead, which, if I remember correctly, just he had passed up. I think it was a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, like maybe part 4 or 5. He turned down to do this. So he made
turned down to the effects for, or turned down to direct?
To direct. He had been offered to direct them, and instead he did Pumpkinhead, which I think was kind of more of a passion project. And the movie didn't do very well in theaters. It was kind of a flop. It wanted to become a cult hit, but not enough to get him work as a director again, because the next movie he directed was a gnome named Norm in 1990. And then he did...
Is that like the buddy cop movie, kind of?
Yes, with Anthony Michael Hall. And,
I remember watching that, and actually I have a copy of that if you guys ever want to watch it. I haven't rewatched it, but when the Wild and Woolly video closed here locally, I bought it for like super cheap.
So he did not have an illustrious directing career, but he still did a ton of special effects and worked on a lot of huge blockbusters and, stuff that you would definitely recognize. And so it's just kind of this thing where that movie not doing well at the theater caused him to not have the career he could have had. But this movie, like I said, came out in 1988, starred Lance Henriksen, who he would have also worked with on Aliens. And two, we have to say the Pumpkinhead creature in this movie looks a lot like the alien from Aliens.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, there's the flamethrower, there's a lot of aliens in this for sure. And I was thinking that while I was watching it as well.
And I think they even had I think they had the same guy who wore the alien suits when they shot the movie Aliens portray Pumpkinhead. And like, it looked a lot like an alien.
It's an odd thing to kind of take so much inspiration from something like that you also
worked on.
Worked on. Like, it was just a weird thing. And to have Lance Henriksen, like, it's very interesting. Obviously, kind of a different vibe as far as the story goes, but yeah, just the look of the Pumpkinhead, kind of the flamethrower element, just like really got
Lance Henriksen.
It's like, come on, yeah. But
I think something too, though, like with it being named Pumpkinhead, like the character not even like, because I guess what you would kind of get from it is that like it was a deformed, because they said like it was in the burial ground that was where they buried the deformed people.
Well, too,
right?
the burial ground was what it was named after more so than its appearance, because it was the Pumpkinhead patch or pumpkin patch or something.
Yeah. But anyway, like, because it's kind of like a backwoods,
supernatural slasher.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really want to say it's like a Southern fried thing, because it seemed like it was almost more like out in the West, like out in like Montana. Where was it even set at? Is there an actual place that it's set in, or is it like some fictional, everywhere USA or whatever?
It doesn't really say what the setting is.
Because like they have the dirt bikes, and it kind of looks like maybe it's out west, maybe Midwest. I don't know.
Or it could be some like farm community in Iowa or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, it's just kind of like a weird creature design for what they were going for. I don't know. I just think my biggest thing is, and like people who listen to the podcast, and you will as well hear me say this about a lot of movies, but this is just a very boring movie. Like with as cool of the design as the Pumpkinhead was, and how as menacing of a creature it could have been, like I feel like, and me and William talked about this previously, talking about the film. I just feel like a lot of the budget went toward the creature, and then when it came time to like kill the hopeless teenagers, that it didn't. None of the kills are particularly gruesome, and it was kind of, like I said, it's kind of boring.
It seemed like an effects guy who was really into the character design.
Yeah,
that focused mainly on that, and then kind of everything else became secondary to it.
I guess too, something I completely forgot to do was just the brief synopsis. I mean, if you're listening to this, you obviously know what the movie is, but after a tragic accident, a man conjures up a towering, vengeful demon called Pumpkinhead to destroy a group of unsuspecting teenagers. And like we said, the movie starts out where they're teens who are really people in their 20s or probably early
30s.
Yeah. People who obviously weren't teens playing teens, which is how all these movies work. So you can't really fault anybody, but they're riding their dirt bikes.
Okay, but when you say they're riding the dirt bikes, they pull up to a
gas station.
It's not really a gas station. It's like
general store
in the middle of nowhere, and decide for some reason it is the perfect place to ride the dirt bikes. And so they get out and they ride the dirt bikes, and like there's a dad and his son, Lance, whatever his name is.
His character is Ed Harley.
Yeah, Ed Harley and his son are there, and he has to go back home and grab some for a customer. So he leaves his kid by himself in the store and doesn't say anything to the people riding the dirt bikes, like on his property.
Well, I mean,
it's just a weird. I don't know. I just found that like
because the turn of events is that he's like, a lot of movies have like discrepancies in real time past while I'm watching the movie versus how much time has passed in that universe. Because it seems like he's really only gone for about 8 minutes or so, like not very long when all this happens, but he's really gone for much longer because he'd have to go back to his house, from his house to somewhere else, and then back. But when they're riding the dirt bikes, the kid runs out chasing his dog, and one of the dirt bike riders hits the kid and leaves him looking pretty clean. I mean, granted, it's because of special effects and what have you, but the kid himself doesn't look that injured, but it kills him.
But he's like smiling half the time too when he's like laying there.
I'm dead.
Yeah, well, it's a kid actor, but and like too, so like it was an accident. They weren't really, aside from picking a weird place to ride their dirt bikes, that was probably an element of saving time. And
well, it turned out too that the guy who killed the kid or hit him he was drunk when he did it, and he also had a warrant or some type of other issue where he'd done something very similar. So he typically kills children with dirt bikes.
That's a more interesting movie there.
Yeah,
it's like Death Proof with the dirt bike, and it's I really didn't think this out.
He's like, man, I gotta go, man. I've already done this. I can't be here. And then he's like, gets in his 88 Corvette and leaves. Because he's dressed very similar to what was probably cool in the 80s and drove what people thought was cool in the 80s. Not that there's anything about Corvettes now, but
well, too, like so he hits the kid. Even if he was drunk, though, drunk or sober, that same thing would have happened.
Yeah,
and then all of them went to try to get help because it's in the middle of nowhere and there's not a phone, and they leave one of their friends there to tell, to keep an eye on the kids.
No, he volunteers to stay.
So, yeah, he stays there. So, like, they weren't complete pieces of trash. They just didn't let it happen and then leave, aside from the guy who did it. But then he later has a change of heart and decides to call the cops. Too little, too late, because now you just got yourself in a lot of trouble. But
yeah, because they conjured Pumpkinhead.
Yeah, so then the opening to the movie, and it was Joel who hit the kid. So that character Joel is kind of the bad guy who has a change of heart, but it's too late. So at the beginning of the movie, it kind of opened with Pumpkinhead chasing somebody to Ed Harley's house as a child, and then he heard the Pumpkinhead like taking this guy. So that's how he knew that it existed, and why after his son gets killed, he decides to go to the old witch who knows how to summon this creature and to summon Pumpkinhead to take vengeance on the kids. And the guy who he sold wood or whatever it was to, like his kid tells him how to get there. And like the kid actor, he was going for some type of performance. Like I don't know exactly what he was going for, but whatever it was, he got it. But then, you know, so then Ed goes and talks to the witch and then summons the Pumpkinhead.
It's just that part's so drawn out. Like I enjoyed
and
I kind of enjoyed the kind of it felt like it kind of felt like a story you've heard before, but then again it's different. I kind of enjoyed the element of it, but I feel like it's such a huge stretch in that part of the film that's what really kills it for me, because the beginning, the opening I like. And you know, even the kid getting hit by the motorcyclist, like I like that setup. But then until the finale, it's like pretty boring throughout.
Well, I thought it was even boring throughout the finale.
You have, you have the teens go back to the cabin, and Joel doesn't want anybody to leave, and he's being a bully and locks somebody in a room. So you have all that kind of melodrama with characters you really haven't had sketched out at all. And you don't see any complexity to Joel at all. It's just he's not a good guy. So then when he kind of has the change of heart and decides, okay, well, maybe we'll talk to the cops or whatever, then it kind of, you know, shifts around. And the fact that the Pumpkinhead doesn't discriminate against any of the teens. It goes after any and all of them to kill them, versus should have really only went after Joel because he was the one responsible.
Yeah,
all the other ones tried to help.
Yeah, but not even that. Like, too, like the guy that stayed with the kid, it's kind of like he was the second one killed or the first one killed, and it's kind of like, well, it kind of sucks for him because he wasn't really even at fault for it and stayed there. So it's like, okay, so they're kind of I guess that was a plot to the movie to have the main character have a change of heart and go there because he realized, you know, he felt the deaths of all the kids or saw them. So it kind of made him have the change of heart. But like you said, you don't – the problem I had, too, is like the deaths of the teenagers or whatever weren't necessarily like, well, I guess they're supposed to be gruesome. Like the effects, they weren't. So it was just kind of like, this silicone hand's grabbing my face. I'm dead. We're thrown through a window.
The most interesting one to me was when the Pumpkinhead grabs the girl and climbs up in the tree and drops her like 30 feet. Like, that was a different type of kill than you typically see. Yeah. Once again, where it looked a lot like the alien in that scene, but just like an alien that wasn't so animalistic and intent on like running around like a creature, kind of more walked around like a person.
I just think that like having
go ahead.
Like, having watched this movie, it would have been a lot creepier if they had maybe even paced it more like Alien or Aliens, where like the creature was chasing them, and it was more like you didn't really see it. You know, you just knew that they were being tortured by something, and they were just, you know, on the run from it. But I think that the approach they took is why it was so boring, because, you know, it was supposed to be intimidating, creepy creature, but the way it killed people wasn't very scary, intimidating, and the pacing of the movie never really worked. I mean, I think that's another thing too. Is like it just never. There was never like a sense of urgency. You didn't feel bad for the people dying, and
it wasn't like they were being pursued. Like, it was just the thing seemed so slow and lumbering. Just there was not a lot of tension there.
There was just no stress, because it wasn't like, you know, in Aliens, like, even though you didn't really know the Marines that well, like, I know they're not really the same movie, but kind of are. It's like you still like were stressed in it, and it was just a stressful event, and it was just kind of torturing to know that those things are around. And like with this, or like even with Jason or Freddy, like there was still just kind of like ominous feelings of it maybe sometimes, and this
helplessness.
Felt that, of helplessness. With this, you're just kind of like, man, you know.
So you have like the element of like Lance Henriksen's character Harley kind of has the change of heart that, okay, I called the Pumpkinhead to kill these kids, and they really don't deserve it. So then he goes back to stop it. And then, so you have like the characters who are like the goody two shoes, which are Tracy and Chris. And Chris is even like, doesn't he have like a sweater around his waist, or was I imagining that? Like he's dressed very preppy.
He had a
doesn't
sweater.
sound incorrect. I watch this in a few weeks.
Yeah, because we were going to do like a video podcast. We ran out, we had time stuff, so we just decided to do this as a podcast because we'd all watched it. And yeah, so you have like those main characters who are all good, really aside from Joel, and you know he was kind of like slightly abusive to his girlfriend and stuff, but even he wasn't completely irredeemable and terrible. You know, obviously if he was to die, I'd be like, yeah, he killed a kid. But then Bunt is the kid that showed Harley how to get to the witch, so he's kind of responsible too for knowing what's going to happen if he tells the guy to go there.
Yeah, he's a little instigator.
Yeah, and then he almost gets killed, but he does end up helping Tracy and Chris some. But it's just like, so the kills aren't all that inspired. There's nothing there that's as memorable as, you know, anything in like Alien, like the chest burster, a lot of that stuff. It all is very memorable and leaves a visual impact on you. A lot of the stuff from Aliens is memorable with like some of those scenes. Granted, in Aliens, there's a ton of the aliens. So, you know, the individual scenes, it's more just about the action you remember, like Hicks getting like sprayed with the acid, like all that stuff you remember a little bit more. Here, there's not any really memorable thing. Like I say, Pumpkinhead dropping the girl from the tree, I kind of remembered from watching this way back in the day when I saw it for the first time, but none of it really sticks out. And I think at the time it was just kind of dismissed as a supernatural slasher. And I think that the only elements that have really turned it into a cult classic are, of course, the effects with the Pumpkinhead creature, because, you know, Stan Winston, that's what he was known for. And it has Lance Henriksen, who has been in a lot of stuff people really like. If you have if you have a different actor in it, then I think that it may be less popular. And two, one thing I noticed in this, just from the kind of filmmaking thing, is there was a ton of stuff in this movie that was day for night scenes, where they shot stuff during the day and then just tinted it blue so it looks like it's nighttime.
Yeah,
and
I feel
it's
like
very
I do
noticeable.
remember one of those or so.
It's incredibly noticeable because they do it quite a bit. Granted, you know, it's hard to shoot stuff at night, but it just seems that they jump back and forth a lot. And a lot of people probably don't notice, but...
One thing, you know, this is full spoilers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I did really like is kind of the end when, you know, Lance Henriksen shoots himself, finally kills himself, and then Pumpkinhead dies, and the shot kind of pulls out, and as it's pulling out, it's showing just those, you know, I think Lance Henriksen maybe, and then one character, I believe it's them too, then it pulls out to show two other characters, and then it pulls even further, and the Pumpkinhead is in the background, and as it pulls out, the Pumpkinhead bursts into flames.
Yeah.
Like, I like that all that was achieved in one shot, just because it did pull you into the moment, because you're seeing multiple things of the story, and then this effect happens that you don't expect to happen, just because there was no break in the cutting or the action or anything. I really like the way that was handled, but again, I always try to find something good to say. And this film's not like a total bust. It's not like laughable or anything like that at all. It's just, as Derek pointed out, the pacing is not well done.
Well, and two, I think that one of the most interesting elements is something that if I was in the writer's room on this, I would have tried to focus more on, is when Harley starts kind of turning into the Pumpkinhead, and the Pumpkinhead starts looking more like him, and they kind of start to kind of become each other. And at the very end of the film, his body, because you see like the necklace that he was wearing, his body is then taken to that same cemetery or that burial ground and buried in place of the Pumpkinhead that he dug up prior. So that kind of, you know, cyclical nature of the person who calls the Pumpkinhead becomes the next Pumpkinhead. Like, yeah. I think that element, if you focus more on the movie of once he calls the Pumpkinhead, he starts to see that he himself is turning into it. And then you have the realization that he's done something terrible and he has to stop it. I think if it had been more anchored on that, then it would have probably sold the story better.
Yeah, a little bit of body horror, Cronenberg.
Yeah, body horror, and just showing that he literally becomes the monster that he, metaphorically became when he called this creature to take vengeance out.
Yeah,
So
based
he,
on his.
so
Yeah.
he turns into the creature instead of actually summoning one. Like by summoning it, he turns into it, and then he attacks the kid.
No,
Well,
he summons.
He summons
one.
it, and he pulled out the body and did all the ritual to summon the Pumpkinhead. But after he summoned it, they became linked, and he started becoming more like the Pumpkinhead. So I'm not sure exactly what all the mythology on Pumpkinhead was. The sequels aren't good. I've watched. There's like TV movies of them. One's like on Sci-Fi a bunch, but
I just like how again it's like Aliens, and then it turns into E.T. by the end of it.
But
when Pumpkinhead gets hurt, he gets hurt.
Like I may be completely wrong in the mythology of this based on the sequels or the movies if I didn't pick up on this, but I would think that you call the Pumpkinhead and you pull that little severed corpse or the shrunken corpse out, and then it summons the creature and it comes and then it kills people. And then by the end of it, that Pumpkinhead that you called dies and burns and goes away. And then the person who called it becomes the next Pumpkinhead. Or maybe that only happens if you kill yourself. Like, I don't know exactly what that mythology would be. But maybe it's like a cyclical thing. Like, each person that calls the Pumpkinhead becomes the next one.
Which would be kind of a cool thing. Because then it could go on forever.
And like I said, then you kind of do that kind of, very literal thing of, you become a monster just, as a person for calling this vengeance upon people and having this horrible fate. And then you then literally also turn into a monster. Like it's a little bit on the nose, but I think that would be more interesting and give you a little bit more of an arc for the Ed Harley character versus him just kind of deciding that it's bad. Like if he looked at his hand and his hand started turning more into like the elongated spinely fingers and things like that, then it would, like you said, there's the body horror stuff, and I think that would bring everything full circle and maybe make the character even a little bit more, because he is kind of a dick. Like his kid dies, but he should just call the cops.
Yeah.
And
I didn't get that.
and then they would have
my phone.
Yeah, I was like, what? So they would have taken care of it, and then that one guy Joel would have eventually, he was going to talk to the cops anyway, so it would have all got straightened out. He would have probably went to prison for some time and what have you, and everybody else would have been like free because they didn't do anything necessarily wrong, aside from pick a really bad place to dirt bike.
Yeah.
But so just the fact that like none of the characters are really that likable. Like I said, Tracy is kind of like the one that leads the charge on wanting to be a good character, and then Chris is also a good guy. And aside from that, though, like even them, they're not very well sketched necessarily. So I think the movie just hinges a lot on the special effects, which are interesting looking, and they're far better here than in any of the sequels in this series. It's just, you can definitely tell it's a special effects person who's kind of, I guess his viewpoint was that first and everything else second. Mm-hmm. And that kind of comes through. So like
but even that, though, like the special effects, like the Pumpkinhead creature is underutilized. Like there was never a super memorable scene in that movie. Like, if you had asked me for a memorable scene, I could not give you one because there's nothing that like stuck out,
Well, I think that also reiterated the reason in those movies and Alien and Aliens, you saw a lot more of the aliens in this the James Cameron film Aliens, but there was still not many of them just walking around fully lit, doing stuff. It was always kind of dark and they're kind of scattering about. Like, so you don't see as many of them, front and center, except like the one that's kind of like in the sewer with Newt, which is an incredibly iconic scene that, I'm sure had an impact on people when they saw it. Like when Newt's in the sewer and she falls down the water and the alien stands up, like that's scary. Yeah. Nothing here really approached that.
I think this film is a good candidate for actually being remade.
Which they're working on a remake.
Are they? Okay. Well, I could see that because, this is not a very strong film, but it has elements that you could see, being very appealing to those who are interested in genre films.
It's got that kind of mythology of like, oh, this character has killed people in the past, and you have kind of these urban legend aspects to it. But then you have kind of the cliched like old witch in the woods type stuff, which you might
and then an iconic character, with Pumpkinhead.
Which I think you might want to rework some of that witch in the woods type stuff, kind of rework it more into just like a
Google.
Well, not Google, but just like
Siri.
Siri, yeah, there you go.
There's like some book that like you could even like just spitballing here. Maybe it's like a backwoods preacher who leads a church that has like this old school type text that tells you how to summon it as part of like their weird offshoot of religion. And that's how you find out how to use the Pumpkinhead. Like I said, you literally have the person who calls the Pumpkinhead start becoming it. And then
And that's the one true religion because they get it right.
Yeah, because it works. So then at the end of the movie, you're like, well, man, Pumpkinhead like created the world.
Pumpkinhead God?
So I think you could go in a lot of interesting directions. It's very well-worn territory of, this creature killed people X amount of years ago. If you do these things, it comes back. Like, that's very well-worn territory at this point. So you got to do something a little bit different to remake it. But the character itself was, ripe for entertaining stories. I was thinking this one, they focused far more on the effects of the creature and Lance Henriksen just being cool than they did on developing likable characters or an interesting storyline. Like I said,
and that's why it was an extremely unsuccessful movie in the box office.
It went on to be a cult hit just because it did have cool creature effects relative to the time, and it had Lance Henriksen, and it wasn't your standard run-of-the-mill slasher just because of those elements. Mm-hmm. But then, to a lot of people, it's probably less entertaining than those third or fourth sequels in Halloween, and well, not the third Halloween, like the fourth Halloween and the fifth Halloween, or because this came out in '88, or like the later Friday the 13th films, like Part 7 or whatever. 7 or 8. So those movies, I think, would have been more entertaining to a lot of the mainstream audiences than this one because more happens throughout those.
Yeah. Again, say what you will about Sharknado, but something happens in that, like in every scene. This, just not a lot happens, unfortunately.
I think another thing, too, though, with this one is that, like, the mythology, like William was saying, could be very cool. And the character design was very cool. But, like, you have it's kind of like they didn't get a stew going or something, Like
it was half baked.
Yeah, they had like everything there to make something really good, but there's just a couple of key ingredients they left out, and it just came out flat. And it's just
and that comes down to the script. You know what I mean? Like they had Lance Henriksen, they had an awesome design. I think it needed more time to kind of develop the script and really hammer some things out to kind of work on the pacing and possibly build up some other ideals that it plays with.
Yeah, I just think too, like, and I can always go back to like the thing with this, and the one thing, even if you hate the thing, I just think the one thing it did really well was it earned you. I'm trying to think how to say this the best way. Like, it felt earned when you saw the creature on the screen. Like it was never cheap, and that's something that I think a lot of movies have a hard time doing, because maybe when they have like even like The Conjuring 2, when you had like the nun character in it, that was the best part of the movie in my opinion, when you had the nun in it. But it felt earned and creepy, and like with The Thing, when you had the aliens in there and they actually saw it, it was always earned. And with this one, like they had a cool creature, so they wanted to put in there as much as they did, or they could once it was actually in the film, but by doing that, you cheapened the effect that it had, and it just, none of it ever felt to me like, okay, this scene's earned. Like, it's been built up. It just always kind of felt like,
you see so much of it, its limitations, it's slow, you're no longer that scared of it. You just know if it gets you, it's going to kill you, but it seems like it's pretty easy to outrun.
Well, aside from the end part where it just drags that dude Chris around.
Mm-hmm. But like another thing too, though, is like when it does kill you, it kills you, it's not like if the thing got hold of you, it was like a gross, terrible, agonizing death, or appear that way because of what happened with the people. Or like if Jason got you, your head was getting smashed in, or you're getting cut in half and shoved up on top of a ceiling, or Freddy got you something, he's going to turn into a meatball and eat you. You know what I'm saying? Like a piece of sausage. Like something terrible is going to happen. When this got you, it just like...
You just died.
Well, too, the creature didn't have much of a personality. The Pumpkinhead didn't. So that's another thing. Like maybe if they had it start to mimic the actions of the person that summoned it and their temperament and things like that.
But even with it not having that much... Because like even in Alien, like they didn't have much of... It was just, like you said earlier, it's a very animalistic thing. So
it's a ruthless predator.
Yeah, and I think even if this worked off of that principle, it would be scarier. But it just didn't. It just, I don't know. Like, I think too, though, what it came down to is like when it was killing the people, there was not a memorable death. And there wasn't something that's like, oh God, that would be so terrible to get caught by this creature and get like nobody's head got eaten or nobody got ripped in half or nobody got dismembered in a terrible way, you know. And it's like when you see this creature, you don't really think you're getting thrown off of a tree. You don't really think of like getting thrown through a window, or you just think of like terrible, like, you know, no skull got ripped through somebody's face or nothing happened, you know. And it's like, I think that's what it is to me. It's like you see this terrifying creature and it's just kind of like, and it just like kills you in a very boring way. It's like, I want to see like people getting their guts ripped out and choked to death with it by this thing. So it's like a
maybe as soon as
sight.
he grabs you, he just picks you up like a ragdoll and rips you in half. Like just something dramatic,
something
at
like
least.
that, or like, you know, like getting your, you know, picking somebody up and like breaking their back. Nothing like that happened. And I think that was what I got from this movie is like, there's never just that death scene that's like, holy shit, they really, like, you didn't get that, you know? Because, like, think about it, like, in Nightmare on Elm Street 1, you know, a lot of the deaths are memorable, like Johnny Depp just explodes all over the place through the bed. You have a girl getting dragged up through the wall, screaming in blood everywhere. You know, on Friday the 13th, you have a lot of different bloody, you know, people get, you know.
The machete to the head of the kid in the wheelchair goes down the steps in part two. And
like, this just didn't have anything like that.
Well,
and I think just being in that era.
Well, in 88, it was after the peak of the slasher boom, which is why it was kind of like a different supernatural bent on that instead of just being like a straight slasher with like a dude in a mask or something. But looking here, like Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 63%, which
that is a little high.
Well, I think that the thing that makes it stand out retroactively is, regardless of, you know, whether or not we found it to be a little slow, it stands out from a lot of those really bad slashers that came out in that era. I mean, and just by virtue.
Okay, but that's kind of like saying like, just because this one didn't,
or it's a 65%
suck as,
now.
Just because this didn't suck as bad as the other ones in its time, it's like, okay, but now to be fair, if you put this in 84, then it probably wouldn't have done so good.
You put this up against
like,
Nightmare on Elm Street, and you know, that was already after Halloween. But you put it up those types of movies because, yeah, I mean, it's not a straight slasher because it's got this supernatural element with like this creature and things like that. But I don't know. It's one of those things where I still enjoy it. Now, if it was on TV, I'd probably sit down and watch it. But it's like Sean said, I think it's one that's a good candidate for not necessarily even a remake, just a reboot or reimagining of the premise. Because I think that, you know, this kind of evil fairy tale or legend type character, I think you can do something cool with it. But there was no dread or any scary moments in that film.
Yeah,
it's just the charm of the effects and the fact it has, you know, Lance Henriksen. I think those elements elevate it to people. But what was on screen when you watch it as a narrative is not what people remember or love about it, if they love it. So, you know, like, so we always talk sometimes about the scores we would give movies if we were to rate them on like a scale of 1 to 10. So what are we thinking here on if you were rating this from 1 to 10? Because once again, these ratings are all subjective, mean nothing. And if you compare one to another, they're not really directly comparable, because I think that's a bad way to look at reviews, is like, oh, if this is a 6 out of 10, this is a 5 out of 10, that means this is better. I think this is just like, so the Rotten Tomatoes score, like I said, so the Rotten Tomatoes is at 65%. Granted, there's not that many reviews on here. It's only counting 20 of them. Because it doesn't, when this movie came out in 88, a lot of publications, that was before the rise of the internet, so they weren't posting these to like.
Was there internet in 88?
There was, but it was like used groups and stuff and very lightly used. So, you know, newspapers and stuff haven't archived all their reviews of Pumpkinhead into their websites or whatever. So there's not a lot of reviews out there. So 20 of them, 65%. The audience score is 47%, and that's off of 19,000 ratings. We once again talked about a lot of user ratings could be manipulated too. On IMDb, it has a 6.2 out of 10, and it doesn't have the Metacritic score on here. But so the consensus on these reviews is it kind of ranges from a 4.9 to a 6.2 on, out of 10 when you're rating, or no, that on Rotten Tomatoes, that was it was a 2.9 out of 5 was the average rating, and it was 47% liked it. So it's kind of somewhere between 47% and somewhere in the 60s. If you look at the critics ratings and then the IMDb and the audience score. So if I had to rate that one, if I had to rate Pumpkinhead kind of from 1 to 10, in terms of just pure entertainment value as a movie, not all the nostalgia elements around it, like I think it's being kind of generous to give it a 6.
Like you said, a lot of this is purely subjective because I feel like if we go back a couple weeks, I probably have given a terrible. I think I gave The Wicker Man like a good score.
Yeah,
and it just because like it Wicker Man sucked. It was a bad movie, but there was some really memorable stuff from it that I've referenced for like over a decade.
well, not
almost.
the bees.
Yeah, but and it's just like that had a lasting impact on me because, and one, it had Nicolas Cage, and I love Nicolas Cage. Like, if anybody listens to this podcast, they know, like, I love Nicolas Cage. So that's also unfair. But with this, like, it didn't leave any kind. I guess, we always, maybe I've talked about this before. I don't know. I think the worst thing a movie can do is not leave anything on you, like not leave a negative impact or positive impact. And this movie did just that. Like, I don't really have anything super negative to say about it. I don't have anything super positive to say about it. So to me, it just kind of exists. So I'm just going to give it just a 5 out of 10 because while the creature effects were cool, the like Sean was saying, like the script did not do it any favors. So the creature didn't do anything memorable and just kind of like a bland movie, So there's no flavor to it. While it didn't leave like a bad taste, it wasn't a good one. So I'm just going right in the middle, 5 out of 10. Because if you ask me a week from now and know anything about this movie, because I watched it last week, I probably couldn't tell anything about it, because there's just nothing that stands out. So, I'm just going right in the middle.
I was very bored throughout it, and I think that's the worst offender of a film, really.
Yeah.
Like it has its elements. I was honestly almost going to say a 3, but I think I float somewhere around a 3 or a 4 for this.
I mean, and usually
just because I was bored,
Yeah, and just if anybody just happens to listen this week, that's unusual for Sean to do because I'm not saying you're overly easy on movies, but you generally see the best out of everything out of the three of us. So for you to go, because usually I'm the one that gives something the lowest score. I'm like the most cynical on this. But for you to go below me, I think speaks volumes about what this movie is. Because if we're not taking out any type of nostalgia out of it at all and just rating it for what it is,
I mean, like I gave it a 6. Like if you were to strip out all of the nostalgia elements, which is inherently impossible to do because I have certain levels of nostalgia from seeing this in the 90s.
I don't have
any.
That's easy for me.
That's what I'm saying. I don't have any nostalgia for this movie.
But like if you take all that out, like it's not a great standalone film with a coherent narrative and a great story arc. It just isn't. But so if you take all those things out, then it would, the score would drop a few points. But the interesting thing to me is, so Stan Winston worked, so he had his hand in a lot of supernatural, like a lot of horror films. So he worked on Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3, The Thing, and then that was his makeup in the makeup department. And then he worked on Terminator and Aliens, Predator. So before he made Pumpkinhead, he worked on Predator and Aliens. He worked with James Cameron and Paul Verhoeven. So just to have worked on those two projects and not really have brought any of their kind of storytelling elements into his. I think he was just, the special effects element to him was the big thing and what was focused on. And that just kind of shows in the overall product with the story. And
even having worked on Predator alone, like if you just almost copied what they done on Predator with this, you would have had a better movie.
Yeah.
Because at least in Predator, you had like dread,
yeah,
and suspense. And now, granted, you also had Arnold Schwarzenegger and you had Carl Weathers. So there's like two, and Jesse Ventura's character wasn't too bad. But you had a lot of more familiar faces because everybody knows Arnold Schwarzenegger. All right. Like most people know who he is. So maybe that's a little unfair, but there's still like an overwhelming sense of dread in the film and like hopelessness and also people died in really terrible ways. Like Carl Weather got both of his arms cut off. And there's a scene where as his arm's falling off, he's screaming and they're shooting the gun in midair. And then Jesse Ventura gets a hole blown through him, and they're finding dead bodies that are skinned into trees, and people are getting their spines ripped out. Like there's a bunch of memorable stuff in it, and this didn't have it.
Well, let's see. So Predator came out in '87, so you've probably been working on this concurrently with Pumpkinhead around the same time, because he came out in '88, but. It's one of those movies that, like I said, I don't think it's the worst. I think it's a pretty good candidate for a remake, as long as the remake is going to be theoretically produced by one of the producers from the Saw series, Peter Block. So if they get the right people involved, then I think it's a franchise that could have a nice reboot and actually be an effective movie. We'll see if it actually happens, but the plan was for it to start filming in 2017, and it's claiming, according to the Wikipedia article, that it'll pay homage to the original film, but only to those who know the first film. So it's not like falling over itself to reference the first one, kind of like the Ghostbusters reboot or some of these other things. So
which it shouldn't, because it's not like it's not gonna. This isn't a name that's going to draw people to theaters. It's a concept that's good enough to be revisited, I think.
Like I said, if they have the storyline be that you go to a witch in the woods to summon this creature, I think that's a bit played out, with all the stuff that's done that before and after that movie came out.
Depends on the tone they take with it,
But,
do like horror comedy. But
you know what I just want to see in the remake? I want my boy Nicolas Cage in it. And I want just
he is the Pumpkinhead.
He would not be above it.
No, he's the Pumpkinhead. There's no makeup. It's just him running around like,
No, I just want some batshit crazy.
Wearing a pumpkin on his head.
Yeah, like just some batshit crazy, full-blown, let Nicolas Cage do whatever he wants, kick-ass, on fire. That's what I want.
You're all bitches.
Yeah, and yeah, that's what I want, because that'd be really entertaining.
I completely forgot that I watched the Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider, the original one that came out in the 2000s.
Did you see the scene where he's watching the monkey doing something really goofy in one of the TVs?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that's so awesome about that is it doesn't fit anything in the movie, so I feel like that's something that Nicolas Cage personally wanted to do.
Because they're flipping through the TV and there's a documentary or something on a gorilla that's kind of banana, and he wants to watch it, and they change the channel and it shows some special about him.
Yeah,
but that's another movie where they focused a lot on the effects, and I think they just kind of missed out on the milieu and feeling it could have had.
Interesting thing. This is also something that Nicolas Cage. Why I know so much about Nicolas Cage, I don't know. But in that movie, the skull for the Ghost Rider was actually a 3D imagery of his skull. Like he had it scanned. And that was something he was very adamant about. He wanted that to be done, and they did it because he's Nicolas Cage.
Well, and they tried to portray him as the same age as Eva Mendes by giving him different hair pieces.
Yeah.
So that's a movie we might have to cover at some point, because I think that is kind of a fun movie for October and Halloween. It's just one where they kind of really missed what it could have been, because it could have been badass, but as it is, it's just kind of goofy, kind of just a notch above the Fantastic Four from the 2000s.
At least at the end of the day, it's so Nicolas Cage-ish, in that time period, that it's so ridiculous and bad that it's kind of good.
And I haven't seen the sequel, Spirit of
Vengeance. The sequel is not good.
But
the sequel is so bad it's not even enjoyable.
And two, that one has Peter Fonda in it, and some Sam Elliott, who has a ridiculous scene where he rides spoiler alert, a ghost horse, because he's a ghost rider.
No, that's in the original.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I haven't seen the sequel. And then two, the character Ghost Rider is in the new season of the Marvel show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that show's not very good.
But it's also
not the Johnny Blaze version. It's the current version of the comics. But so
we got off topic.
Yeah, so that was the discussion of Pumpkinhead. So if you're enjoying the podcast, you can do us a huge favor. Go out to iTunes and leave a review. That helps other people find the podcast and know what it's about. If you're listening to these via YouTube, you can always leave a comment, because we do enjoy the back and forth we get on YouTube comments. Or you can send us an email at podcast@housebyveostore.com. where we've had people send us before recommendations for things to look at. If there's something that you think would be really great to cover, we haven't yet. Or you can just, any general comments or questions or mistakes, because I'm sure we make quite a few of them.
Yeah, because just real quick about sending us suggestions to do podcast over, one of the movies, this was a fan suggestion or recommendation, however you want to say it, was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And I thought that movie is not going to be any good. And I still don't know if I've watched a movie yet this year that I've enjoyed more than that. If you want to know your reason why, is go back and check the podcast out and listen to us talk about it. Because like when we did the podcast, we thought it was going to make a 30-minute, and it was just probably one of the more enjoyable. I think I had just as much fun talking about it as I had watching it. And I thought I was going to have no fun at all. And it was just such a ridiculous, fun movie that. So the recommendations are obviously welcome, because you might suggest something to us like that, like this, and then you really enjoy it. You know,
because it's like when I had seen it before. It's been a long time.
And I wish I knew the guy's name that had suggested it, but that was so long ago. But it just we appreciate it, and it's like I said, just you may give us something to suggest that we may have not thought about, and
I have to go back and look. I don't remember, because we have a few people suggest things. Like one suggestion we got was the George Romero movie Martin, which we'll try to get to at some point. There's a lot of Romero movies we haven't covered. We'll get to some like Monkey Shines and stuff that's not like some stuff like I watched The Crazies. I don't know if we'll do that one. It's kind of slow. But of course the of the Dead movies, The Night, Dawn, Day. So we'll cover all that stuff at some point.
Look, I've watched the remake of Death Virus Flesh Eater, whatever it's called. Oh, Kevin Wood. I can watch anything. All right.
Well,
we made it through that. We can cover.
Hey man, have you seen the remake of Day of the Dead?
I've seen it. It's got it's the one like where there's the guy that's like the vegan or vegetarian. So then when he becomes a zombie, he's kind of like Bub and doesn't want to hurt people. And it's got what's her name from American Beauty in it?
Mina Suvari.
Yeah, and it's got Ving Rhames playing the brother of his character from Dawn of the Dead. So, yeah, we might cover some of those things, but we're definitely going to get into Romero at some point. But kind of got off subject there again. But, so if you send any emails or suggestions, very much appreciated.
And also, too, on our Facebook page this month, every day we're going to post a new Halloween commercial from like the 80s, 90s, and maybe even a couple ones that have been released in the past couple of years that are really good. Check that out. I think the first day we did Pizza Hut, the old Pizza Hut commercials. Did you remember that, Derek, or was that kind of?
I kind of vaguely remember that.
Yeah, I remember really liking those. It was like the Mr. Bob, which I thought was a Mr. Bob ripoff from the SNL skit, but it was from the same guy who created that, which makes you feel good about it. Before I was like, oh, they're just ripping this off. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed that commercial. So there'll be a new one every day leading up to Halloween. So definitely go give us a follow on Facebook. We've already got quite a few shares on some of those and some new likes from it. So I think people are already enjoying by now only 2 have been up. By Tuesday, it'll be 4, of course, because it's going up on the 4th.
Nostalgia. We're cashing in. And then we'll have some short films coming out during the month of October, which I think will be something of interest to everyone. So we'll have those coming out. And we'll have more content we're going to try to put out to do during the month of October. So make sure to give us a like on Facebook and follow our YouTube channel or subscribe to our YouTube channel to find all the videos we're doing. Then you can just go to housebyvideostore.com to find links to all of our social media accounts. You just find them all there and all the work we're putting out. And we also have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/HBTVS, where you can donate any amount to help us out with some of the server fees and podcasting fees and money as we're working through these original projects, because buying lights and a bunch of stuff isn't necessarily cheap. And even this short film we're going to be shooting pretty soon, which is not going to be even 2 minutes long, I've already spent quite a bit of money on lights for it. Stupid party lights and some string outdoor hanging lights and stuff, which adds up. But so any amount helps. And then if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at Will_droid.
You can find me pretty much in every major social media outlet at MetaWorldDerek.
And I'm at Blevins Sean on Twitter and at Sean2D2 on Instagram.
And that will bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.